Welcome to the space between. This is where honest conversations live. Be prepared to explore the gap between what we say we do and what really drives growth, creativity, and change. Brought to you by MSQ. Visit msqindex.com to learn more. Join us now as we enter the space between.
Welcome to this episode of The Space Between, where I'm sat down with Ben Slater, MSQ's co-founder, and we are sat with Tom Salmon. Hello, Tom.
Hello.
Tom is the founder of Agency by Agency, which is doing amazing work, sort of unwrapping what's happening in the agency marketplace within the UK. But so, Tom, would you like to sort of, tell us a little bit more about yourself and Agency by Agency and what you feel the business is doing and will do?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Seth. And thanks for having us on today. So we set up Agency by Agency really to try and make sense of what the hell's happening in the agency sector in the UK. My background is in agencies. I was MD of an agency called Epiphany. We were a search specialist, about 190 people. We had offices in Sydney and Leeds in the UK and in London. And over the years, we kind of grew. It was really interesting. And then we became part of a PLC called J-Wing, became part of a kind of a wider listed business. And even when we were kind of making decisions about how to grow Epiphany and what you should be moving into, a lot of the time you'd be kind of relying on instincts. I think a lot of the time, sometimes that instinct serves you really, really well. There's no drama, especially at the time when the economy was growing and where investment in digital was kind of growing, especially in the performance kind of marketing end of things where we were. Anyway, kind of skip forward a few years. I left there in 2020, mid-pandemic, seemed as good as time as any to kind of jump into chaos. And I've been working with agencies ever since in more of like an advisory role. So I help them with anything from their strategy through to their propositions, through to sometimes their kind of operational details, their sales details, and basically trying to help founders and leaders and agencies make sense of what they need to do in their business. But throughout this whole time, there's always been a kind of a gap. When you're making decisions or you're trying to help an agency make a decision on what they might do, where the opportunity is or where the risks are, where the growth is, you're kind of reliant on fairly partial data, I would call it. So there's some really great work that's done out there and has been done for years that have been using surveys. They'll have an interest. They might be a recruitment specialist, so they'll ask agencies about talent and they'll do a survey and they'll do great analysis on it. Or they might be more interested in kind of the financial side of an agency, so they'll do surveys about that kind of end of it. But there's no consistency in kind of how we define agencies, how we categorize agencies, how data about those agencies is collected. So it means all of these really great efforts to try and understand what's going on in the sector, which is survey based, well, they rely on agencies completing the survey. And as we all know, as strategists and market intelligence people, what people say and what they do are, not always aligned. And that's not deliberate. That's not people kind of being deliberately kind of opaque with their data. Is just as human beings, what we say and what we do is often different. So we wanted to create something that was agnostic of survey. We don't do any surveying of agencies. The only thing an agency has to do to be on our data in the UK is exist, which is about as low effort as you can be, I think. We don't really
low bar.
Yeah, I think we hope so. We want to make it easy. And what we've done, we've worked with a series of technology and data partners to identify agencies, to classify them in their own words. So we're not sort of dropping them into kind of buckets that might not be relevant these days. And then we attach loads of different data points to them. So, what the agency does, what they specialize in, the kind of sectors they're operating in, But then we can also attach data to that around growth rates and the profile of their directors, or obviously their location, their ownership structure, their company structure, um, their turnover, their EBITDA, all these kind of different metrics. So we've got about 100 different metrics per agency. We store 90 pages of web text per agency, and the data updates every month. So it means we can basically have a rolling map of what's going on in the landscape. So we could actually then produce insight on who's doing what, which bits are growing, which bits are more vulnerable to economic shock and seeing the disruption that we'll probably talk about. And so we're providing that free to agencies. Because I would have liked it. It was kind of in that share. But then we also work with people who are interested in working with agencies to match them with agencies that kind of fit what they do.
That's amazing. Wow. I mean, that's an incredible sort of task that you've taken on there for the agency marketplace. And it's in a sense, it's kind of unbelievable that it didn't exist before, because the agency marketplace, as you now know, is so vast.
Yeah, it is kind of incredible, and it's not surprising in a way, because it's really hard work to actually classify agencies and find agencies, and that's as much to do with how that's not agencies' fault. That's how economic data is collected, not just in the UK but globally. We don't have to almost want to register a company's house, whatever. We don't have to tick a box saying yes, I am I'm a platform-driven agency that specializes in blah 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 blah. These categories are really loose, so the creation of the data is really challenging. And that's what took the first 12 months of work, actually. Before we had gone public and started studying what we're doing, we wanted to see whether we could actually do it, and we didn't know whether we'd be able to or not.
But that's evolved. I mean, back in my first agency days, and I had an agency for about 10 years, New Zealand, Australia, and all the rest. I came into with a partnership, and they class themselves as a traditional agency, and I brought some digital skills. And then that was right at the beginning of the digital revolution. And we I guess you'd say, we pivoted to be you call yourself a digital agency all of a sudden, because that was the new hotness. And then we started to work more with direct. So we were a digital agency with a direct component. And then we went back to being a full service agency. So even within an agency itself, we were continually redefining what we were. And those are pretty broad terms from back then. I mean, and then there was boutique agencies that just did cool stuff. You didn't have 30 or 40 staff, you had 5 or 6, and they were flipping rad, whatever it was. So the fragmentation of even how an agency defines itself now, that, like you say, that's a huge task.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge task.
And it's really interesting. Well, I think it's interesting.
You would.
Look at audience of one. But seeing how language evolves and sort of seeing the trends, that is really, really fascinating. I mean, even when I first started Epiphany, we described ourselves as a search agency.
There you go.
And then somebody came up with the language of performance marketing, which was the biggest land grab in history, obviously, because all marketing is performance, should be performance related. Yoik, we'll have that.
Yes.
So we became a performance marketing agency, and then that meant that we could build capabilities in conversion, in programmatic display, in development, in digital creative, performance creative, in PR, but all linked back to performance. So the language really matters, because agencies are sometimes using it to make sure they're in the right category in the client's mind, and sometimes using it as a way of differentiating, even when they don't have a differentiated proposition. So they're using language as the differentiator rather than the actual activity.
We in branding ourselves as a digital agency, separated ourselselves from being a web design company, because that was the thing, was to be a web designer. And we obviously had web design within our capability, but with that business mind, all the strategy and everything else. So that helped to differentiate ourselves. But I think that was probably meeting the market as well. in terms of what people were talking about. So, like you say, if someone was coming and looking for those services, we wouldn't necessarily be found back in those days if someone typed in, "I need a web designer." I need a digital agency would be where it would come from.
And that's a really interesting point, because our starting point into this was to define agencies according to how they describe themselves, which is largely by specialism or capability.
Yes.
When you listen to what clients want from an agency, the kind of specialism, yes, of course, that's a factor that you need to be able to do the thing that the client wants you to be able to do. But when you look at the hierarchy of what clients are actually looking for in a partner, often agencies don't describe themselves in that way, because it doesn't feel, I don't think as an agency, it feels sufficiently differentiated. I think so. I think you've got this whole kind of market that is really diverse, is way bigger than I think people thought it was when we first published it, which I haven't said, 25,000 agencies in the UK. We've got.
Yeah, I was going to ask what the number was.
Yeah, I should have led
5,000.
And we're just talking about the UK market. Yes.
Yeah, UK. And that's active agencies. That doesn't include dormant businesses and what have you. So you've got a really diverse market. You've got a big market. You've got quite a concentrated market, though. When you look at where the growth is coming from within the UK market, it's not equally distributed amongst that 25,000. You've got maybe between 800 and 1,000 or 1,500 agencies actually driving the majority of that, the kind of the growth in deployment and turnover, and the rest of the market is a lot of it is stable. It's kind of quite happily doing its thing, not necessarily kind of growing or kind of shrinking much every year. It's kind of in a stable place. And then you've got part of the market which is struggling, and that the kind of the struggling agencies aren't all in one sector. It's not like everyone who is pick on the brand strategists. If you're a brand strategy agent, it doesn't mean you're either succeeding because you're in the right category or failing because you're in the right category. But you do find that there are some categories where there are more agencies that are either growing or more agencies that are shrinking.
Yeah. So let's sort of talk about that sort of disruption. The struggle. And I mean, you've spoken previously about the sort of disruption that is happening for agencies, and you say it's like a triple threat.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain what those are and why it's a threat?
Yeah, I think so. There's three main forces, I guess, and these aren't the only forces, but three main forces that I think agencies are obviously having to contend with at the moment. One of them in the UK is the economy. Got a really flat economy. There isn't a huge amount of consumer confidence, and consumer confidence feeds into business confidence, and when business confidence is low, investment in marketing tends to be low, and obviously so everything kind of follows. I think the other thing, kind of economically, which I think is really important to kind of have in this conversation, is this kind of concentration of wealth that we're seeing. We're living in a more unequal society now than we did maybe sort of 10, 20 years ago in terms of the distribution of wealth amongst most people. But I think that also comes into very sharp focus in our own world and in marketing as well, where you look at where media spends is actually going at the moment. And it's obviously going into Meta, it's going into Alphabet and Google.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what the percentages are, but they're eye-watering in terms of the dominance of those vehicles. And that doesn't always help agencies either. So this idea, so the media abundance thing then comes in. So you've got the economy, this idea of media abundance, in that there's never been so much media or platforms for marketers to run campaigns across. And that means that for clients like marketers, you have this real challenge around, where do I place my bets? Where do I put my money? What should I be doing? As an agency, you have the same question, but you might not have access to kind of run campaigns across all those channels. So, if every job looks like a nail when you use a hammer or whatever that expression is, so you kind of, you could be guilty of putting clients into channels that they're not going to get a return on. But agencies have to make sense of that, so clients come to you and say, no, where should I place my bet? What's going to produce the return on the investment? And that landscape is really, really complex. Marketing mix modeling and attribution is really, really hard, but agencies are, quite rightly, I think, sometimes being seen by clients say, we need you to help make sense of this. And that's really hard. So
sorry, I was going to say, so would you say that the market, if you look at the overall marketplace for agencies, you see growth, but it's weighted towards particular, the Metas and the Googles and and those types of organizations, and that there are thousands of agencies, your typical brand design agency that is surviving, not necessarily growing.
Yeah, and I think even those agencies that are specializing in those channels like Google and Meta, they're a lot of them are increasingly finding that those platforms aren't, their offer to agencies isn't that supportive a lot of the time.
Oh, it's changed dramatically since going from back when I first started in this, and I'm a 30-year veteran of this industry. The decisions that were made back then were way easier than the decisions made now. Like you mentioned Epiphany. I would imagine even back then there would have been science level expectation of what you were going to present, and it's not just pick a lane and get in the lane. There's a whole lot more, and that has changed a lot now because of AI. If I can bring that into the conversation quickly, but it's still there's still a massive human management role, understanding role that comes into that. It's a huge overhead, and when it's changing all the damn time.
And I think those platforms as well, they're making it more and more attractive and easy.
Yes,
for brands to actually almost bypass the agency and basically plug and play direct in the channel. And that's not necessarily a good thing for the brand, I'd argue.
Yeah, and the larger agencies are also the holding company agencies are also sort of tapping into that almost practically, sort of self-serve product where you can interact with the agency, but not in a traditional way as well, which again is a problem for the rest of the agency marketplace.
I think if I look at it, I actually think it's in the grand scheme of things, it's a good thing, because I can well imagine that most people that get into agency land are not doing it to look at reports and charts and actually, to be bluntly honest, having their nuts on the line when those results come out. We go into this field. Most people would go into having a creative bent or a service bent or something like that. So to have those tools be presented to us and to our clients and in a way which just makes it easy is a good thing. I mean, maybe I'm projecting here because I freaking hate I've been doing SEO, SEM, and everything for donkeys, and I love presenting results when it goes well. It's not not so much the other way. But I think, but that's just the evolution of that side of the industry as well. So if we can spend more time thinking about something and less time doing it, then I think that's, to be honest, it's a good thing.
I think that's increasingly going to be the job of the agency, isn't it? So that expression of where do I place my bets? I think that's the fundamental question that agencies need to help their clients answer. And so you look at the Epiphany model back in the day, probably 80% of our revenue was coming from SEO and PPC, by and large. But our clients worked through us, so they didn't go direct to Google. We
dashboard.
Or the dashboard. Yeah, there was an agency kind of brokering the insight, the intelligence, the best bets. My concern is where a client basically goes direct to Google, are they getting the best advice from obviously the media owner when that isn't being kind of supported by almost like an independent, and it should be independent advice, or at least kind of it kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Impartial is probably better than independent. Impartial advice from
a champion. They should be a champion for their client.
Yeah.
And sometimes not necessarily champions. The people providing the services they want to get the money in so they can get and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with commerce. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it is finding that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think balance is so important. And there was a statistic I think I read from agency by agency in terms of this, talking about AI, in terms of sort of AI sort of silence that happens in agencies, that isn't it something like 75% of agencies are using AI, but only less than 25% are actually kind of
talking about it. Yeah.
Whereas obviously, the big holding companies, the Metas, the Googles, they've obviously embraced it and they're sort of loud and proud about AI, and agencies are really struggling as to how to communicate it as a value sell to their clients.
Yeah. So I guess that's the third pillar of this kind of triple threat. So you've got the economy, and you've got the media abundance piece, and you've got enter stage left AI. And I think my personal view is, if the economy was in a far healthier state, our outlook on AI would be radically different. I think we've started, AI has kind of been introduced to us all in an environment where growth is low, and therefore efficiency is kind of king,
desired,
desired. Yeah. So, so immediately we're into this world of, what can I do quicker, cheaper, faster? Not necessarily more effective all the time, by the way. That's a different thing. Whereas actually, if we were in kind of growth mode, the effectiveness conversation and the opportunity conversation, I think, would be far more prevalent. So AI kind of comes in and quite rightly, or maybe wrongly, the promise is faster, quicker, better. Clients look at that and go, brilliant. If my agency is using AI, I should be getting things faster, quicker, better. The agency ends up taking all the overhead for the AI in terms of training it, in terms of paying seats.
100%.
So it's almost like the agency takes all the pain and has to train its people, has to change its processes, takes all and has that investment into doing that. And actually then it has a margin erosion effect at the other end if they're not careful.
So they get hollowed out effectively.
It's not only that, it's the traditional model of upskilling internally has been a slow process, a slow burn. You might send your staff off to do a training course in something, or you might bring in a client, you've got an opportunity to do something, so you build that into the cost of the project, and you go, okay, well, or you take a hit on it or whatever. Literally every day, every hour of every day, there is something that changes.
Yeah.
That is a programmatic change, or a mind state change, or an opportunity change that is going on in this space. And AI has become this big beast word that we almost need to start fragmenting down what AI actually is, because it's just become this voluminous big thing that's hanging out, whereas it can be more specific, and it should be more specific.
Yeah.
You look at the latest releases that have come out of China with the seed something or other, whatever it's called, last couple of days. And it's just insane, this video model. Absolutely insane. And I can't tell you how many posts I've seen on X of, well, Hollywood's dead. But that was the same Hollywood's dead story was the same 12 months ago when Sora came out.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same conversation. Hollywood's dead. It's just at a different stage.
Yeah.
So I honestly, I feel deeply for people in agencies at the moment, because it's so hard to pick a winner. And I don't know if there is going to be a winner, a horse you need to back. It's just become fragmented, and again, I see that in the most positive of ways. But the overhead, Tom, the overhead is intense, both in human capital, in monetary capital, and all sorts of resource issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess if I'm being optimistic about this,
It could be.
the positive thing here, if there is one, is that clients are going through exactly the same trauma, if you like.
Yeah.
You know, so exactly like you said, things are happening so quickly. It's not like anyone is necessarily ahead of the game in this. No. We're all exposed to it, and unless you're actually in the development lab, or working directly on the board of these kind of Claude, Anthropic, and all the links.
But even then, they're learning as they go. They're learning as they go. I would love to see how far ahead Anthropic is, in terms of what they release. I would imagine that margin of development to test to release is getting just squeezed. Well, it would just be so tight.
Yeah. Well, the latest versions have actually been written by AI, haven't they?
Yeah, Opus 4.6 is just absolutely incredible, though. Have you tried it? It's so good. Yeah. Oh my God. Anyway, sorry.
Let's talk about the sort of the actual human challenges for.
Oh, Seth, you with your human stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm all about the human. What the stats are revealing currently for that, because obviously, on the one side, we're hearing this whole thing about sort of juniorization of agencies, because agencies are under such a lot of pressure. They've had to, they're losing a lot of senior people out of the business, and we have this sort of juniorization mentality. Then on the back of that, we have AI, which saying, well, AI can do things that a junior could. And you end up with agencies that are being sort of hollowed out from a sort of human perspective. So what are the challenges there, or what are the stats saying in terms of?
Yeah, so that? We're not seeing that play through in the stats yet. So that's probably a positive. There will of course be a time lag in this, but we're not seeing all of that play through. I think with all of the promise that AI is going to save us all from kind of drudgery and jobs and all these kind of things, we're going to live in some kind of utopian future, I think is maybe some grains of truth in it, but it's a very, very useful shareholder story for Franthropic and other people. People who put that much money in that this is there are big players in the market here that won't be around in a number of years, and that's just economics. That's not me. That's not a crystal ball thing. There is too much money.
But I guess that's always been the case. I mean, there's always been sort of flux and flow and change in the agency landscape.
Yeah, but I think that so in terms of kind of backing horses and which one to choose, I think the trick for an agency from the human point of view is to not necessarily believe all the hype that we read. We need to recognize that some of this hype is marketing, but it is here, it is upon us, and I think what we need to be doing as an agency community is figuring out what this means for us and for the future of the sector. So I think if we believe all the hype and we go, right, we are pulling the drawbridge up, we're not creating any kind of junior roles, that can't be good. Honestly,
I totally agree.
So I wonder whether part of this, and then kind of, I guess, some of what WPP is starting to do with Open maybe plays into this, where effectively what you're doing, you're taking all of your agency's skill set, knowledge, wisdom, data, lessons, insight, all those kind of things, and making that available, surfacing it to at least everybody in the agency, even if you're not kind of allowing like a plug and play system for clients to come in and access something like that. At least use AI to basically kind of synthesize and actually share knowledge and insight within the business. Yeah. And then suddenly you go, well, actually, could this be a route to not just having kind of junior talent execute the work, but junior talent supported and actually working with the aggregation of all the experience in the business. So you could potentially have grad schemes on steroids or apprenticeship schemes on steroids with this. So far from it being a route to kind of pull the drawbridge up? Could this actually be a route to, supercharge a whole generation of amazing marketers, creatives, thinkers, strategists?
And
I hope so. I believe hope
yeah,
so.
and you say that that's what we should be doing, but are you seing that happening now?
We're still seeing agencies kind of grappling with what does this mean. So that's like you mentioned earlier on, where most agencies by now are using AI as some kind of workflow, but only a small proportion. We can see.
Yeah, they're stuck in that stage one.
Yeah, exactly. So agencies who are trying figuring out what does this mean for us? How do we kind of plug it into what we do? They're often coming at it from an efficiency point of view. Sometimes that efficiency plays out in terms of how can we save hours doing this task, and sometimes it plays out in terms of how can we save salary costs in terms of overheads. But both are being driven by efficiency. Now, of course, that is only a toe in the water in the AI world. There is a future that some agencies aren't kind of even thinking about yet, which is, what does this do to the actual model of my business?
Yep.
So, or an agency that's still basing its revenues on time, resources, selling hours, or selling expertise, but through the vehicle of hours and time and materials. You need to be really, really thinking about whether that is the best value exchange for your clients and for you as a business. And I'd argue that model has been on its way out for some time, and I think that AI will supercharge that.
Okay. But you know what? It works both ways, though. Like that's a model that we've sold for a long time, the commoditisation of hours, and that's a model which clients have accepted for a long time. We had Nestle as a client for 6 or 7 years, Trans-Tasman, both sides of Aussie and New Zealand. And I've told this story before. I would have meetings with, the accounts team or whatever that was based in Singapore, and we had to go through and list and I'm sure this is not a new story for people in agency land, but list every single person in the agency that had anything to do with Nestle, put an hourly rate against them. As a director, I was being paid apparently $550 an hour, and and meetings. But if you looked at it, a single meeting would cost the internal client $3,500 for a half-hour meeting. If you looked at it like that, but that was the model that was pushed upon us by, we've seen it out there, and it's fed back by the companies, and it was really hard to deal with. It was a complete disconnect. So it needs to happen on both sides.
Yeah,
there needs to be an appreciation of that on both sides. That it's not even a value model. It's just, have we done a good job? Can we get paid for it? And at a fair market rate. And some people are going to be more expensive, and some people aren't. It's just the way that it goes.
Yeah, but I think agencies are also they're sort of stuck in trying to deliver the now. When and this goes back to what you're also talking about, Tom, in terms of how they deal with talent as well, and they got to be thinking about the next. And so one of the other areas that is you've spoken about is this sort of the sort of efficiency versus experimentation, and so your 70-30 rule, which seems quite sensible.
Yeah, so the idea here. So this is I can't claim credit for this idea. It's Zoe Salmon whose concept this it comes from originally.
Right.
She's brilliant. Everyone should look up her Substack. So she argues that if we're only approaching this through the lens of efficiency, we're dead
in the water.
Yeah, we're looking at it from the wrong angle. So she argues that there should be probably 70% of effort spent on what does this mean today and for the next kind of 12 to 24 months in my business, in terms of optimizing process, creating more effective work, skilling people up, all those kind of like quite internal kind of mechanisms. The other 30%, she argues, is actually using the same technology to start looking at different scenarios of business. So rather than sort of taking the current business model and optimizing it through an AI lens, she argues that, okay, well, let's use AI and say, look, run 5 scenarios for my agency. In scenario 1, this happens. In scenario 2, this happens. Or you could even say to the AI, create 5
What other scenarios?
and run which scenarios are out there, which ones are maybe more likely, less likely, which ones are more severe or kind of opportunity laden from a business. But within each scenario, what are the opportunities that we've got out there? So actually that could end up actually quite radically reframing what the business does. I mean, we could be sat here in 10, 15 years time, if not sooner, saying the anachronism in this world is actually the use of the word agency.
Yeah. So, no, I think that sounds brilliant. And it goes back to, that thing about, with 25,000 agencies in the UK, how do you stand out as being different? And that is a whole other conversation, isn't it? That agencies that have just been using the same language, they say the same things, they are unable to actually differentiate themselves from one another, and actually using AI in that way is a godsend.
But the agencies have been able to differentiate themselves a
I'm not
lot.
saying they don't.
No.
But
In terms of I don't mean
they struggle.
but it's usually the output, it's the clients, it's the what they're doing, and usually that's been the top 10% of the agency work. That's the thing that differentiates them, and usually it's the loss leader work. It's the stuff that you put your best creatives on because you're going to be getting an award or whatever, and all the grunt work that's being done from the clients that you sort of can just make happen. Those are the clients that bring in the proper revenue, and when you lose those highlighted clients, it can make a massive difference to your agency and how you appear in market, and therefore you're right, Seth. You end up just being another blimmin' agency, and it's that same old story about competing on price, and it's just you get lower and lower and lower. No, I mean, but it all sounds very negative. I don't know. I'm with you, Tom. I think that, and you, Seth, as well. I think that this industry is actually going through a rebirth at the moment. I really think it is. I think the opportunity that AI presents to be able to involve deeper critical thinking of what you're doing, either creatively or strategically, is flipping fantastic. But we need to start backing ourselves as well. And your comment about the human before, Seth, that's so important. Just having the natural and innate ability to be able to go, flip, I've got an opinion and here's what it is. And that lived human experience means so much. Absolutely back it up with research and opinion from AI, but put your foot down and have an opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm sure are you seeing that in your statistics, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing, so we measure growth rates. I mean, so we measure growth rates according to turnover growth, but we also measure it in terms of, so now, headcount growth. And headcount growth metric allows us to overcome inflation and on those kind of things over the years. So, so we're seeing growth in lots of different pockets of the sector. There are agencies growing. I think the common narrative around the agency sector can be a little bit dour, certainly in the UK at the moment. But there are agencies growing. We measure scale-ups. We measure, so those are agencies with 10 people or above for the last 3 years that are growing by around about 20% a year. So we're measuring them, and there's around about kind of 800 to 1,200, depending on how you kind of cut the data. But there are agencies growing. Good. So that's good. Where are they growing? Well, they're growing in pockets where where skills are scarce, I guess. So So they are in new channels sometimes. Sometimes they are in more complex, kind of multi-capability sort of environments. So, for example, influencer is still growing. It's new. I say new relative to other things like market research, which has been around 50 years, so not new, but so Amazon Marketplace growing, and I think that's a result of there are fewer agencies in market offering that capability, but there are also fewer skilled people in market that a client can actually bring into the team and build a team around. So it's harder.
So you're saying, specifically in Amazon Marketplace, there is a burgeoning market in people who know how to market on Amazon Marketplace.
Exactly. Yeah. And actually that's going all the way through to how do you use Amazon as a platform to actually advertise and sell your products, all the way through to fulfillment. So it becomes like a CX conversation as much as.
Wow.
So actually it's a very, very deep commercial relationship with the client, often at a very, very specific point in its life cycle as well. So
multi-tier.
An e-commerce brand picking Amazon to start with, and maybe they migrate into other platforms over time, but they're backing Amazon for now. So the point about specialization is not always about specializing in a certain skill or capability. Sometimes it's specializing in a particular moment in time for that brand. So saying like, we are for startups, or we are for enterprise brands, or we are for, a moment where the brand has got huge market, they're mature, they're in market, but maybe growth has slowed. And actually kind of picking a moment, specializing for a brand is another way of specializing. It's not all about niching down into a vertical or into a specialism. It can be niching down into a moment as well.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. And I guess there's a lot of agencies that, that they are effectively still the same agency that they were sort of 10, 15, 20 years ago. And they haven't moved with the times in terms of how they position themselves. So I think that's a really, really good and sage advice. So my sort of final question here is that if we were having this conversation in 3 years' time, what do you believe we'll be talking about in terms of agencies, and will it be good or bad? Do you think?
Is it our digital twins that are having this conversation, and we're sitting in a pool somewhere with a margarita? Is that what's happening?
Well, I guess it depends which LinkedIn post you're reading, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah. Oh God, I mean that's a really that my answer to this question can only be wrong, right? So
absolutely.
It's awesome. I'm going to start answering questions like that all the time.
Yeah. So that's my get out of jail free card on this. I think if you're being optimistic about it, like exactly you said, Ben, this is a moment where the agency sector is going through a change, but it's important we recognize opportunity. I think all the noise out there about this being the death of the holdcos and the rebirth of the indie landscape is probably a bit too simple. I think the world isn't quite as obvious as that kind of dichotomy between them. I think the whole coast continues to have scale, and it offers some huge advantage when it comes to some things, not least training AI models in what the hell's going on and giving that value back to the clients. Indies offer something very different in terms of agile proximity to client, all those kind of things. So I think those kind of huge narratives that are happening at the moment will be borne out as rubbish. The world isn't as simple as that.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to the kind of the independent landscape, I would imagine that what we'll see are probably to be a bit kind of down for a second, probably fewer agencies out there. But I think those agencies I'm not talking about 80% being wiped out or anything like that. I'm just fewer now. I think we're almost in the moment over the last few years have been peak agency in terms of the number of agencies out there.
Yeah.
I think we'll see fewer, but I think there'll be smaller, fewer fixed costs, but acting in far more interesting, kind of connected specialist kind of networks. And then the reason I say that, so I do have a data point, is that we're starting to do loads of really cool work looking at how agencies actually are within the government's industrial strategy for the UK. Right. So the creative industries has been identified as one of the frontier economies that the government is seeing its industrial strategy to actually help grow productivity and the UK economy. So one of the ways that is being supported is that the government is recognizing that regional clusters of talent are really important. So the agency scene in Newcastle is very different to the agency scene in Bournemouth or Bristol or Manchester or Leeds or Hull or Glasgow or
or Brisbane.
Or Brisbane. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We haven't got Brisbane in the data yet. But
that's not on the list. Okay,
no,
all right.
The ambition is to go
that's the ambition. Yeah.
Agency by agency.
So this kind of recognition that, you're more likely to have, for example, in Brighton, there's a high proportion of agencies working in sustainability and social purpose than there are in Manchester. In Manchester, you've got high levels of media and performance, for example. So you have these kind of hotspots of talent, and I think that is sometimes a problem in terms of competitiveness, but sometimes it's an opportunity in terms of talent. So if you want to actually recruit people who are specialists in this kind of talent pool in performance marketing, you probably look along the M62 corridor, to be honest. That's probably your route to there. So I think we'll see agencies probably being smaller, more specialist, but working together in a more collaborative way. And that collaboration thing is definitely something I've seen changing over the last few years, certainly since COVID. The idea of being in a room with your competitors 10 years ago, when I was in that MD chair, it was unheard of. You may be friendly if you meet each other at awards do and all these kind of things, but you'd never get the run and have an honest conversation about what was going on.
It's the opposite down here. It's the absolute, and it has been for a long time. Yeah, there was strength in numbers. I think
what is changing here too, and I think that strength in numbers thing is definitely how it is now, but it wasn't. That is a change, and that's a change to the better.
It is a change to the better, because I love that about the industry here, and it's always been like it's been like for 25 years.
Yeah,
you could share intimate challenges with your competitors, and know that you were going to get pretty much an honest answer or some advice or whatever, and then you'd go to battle and pitch against each other. But that's interesting. That's a real cultural difference.
Yeah, it's definitely changing. Definitely changing.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I feel it is definitely changing, and I think it's good for agencies to cross proliferate in terms of their conversations, and it's such a big and vast industry in the UK, and so incredibly important that I think the more that agencies talk to each other, the better, and it's good to know that you're not alone, I guess. And
can I ask
my stats showed that apparently there's two agencies to every single coffee shop in the UK. So I think if you just go into your local coffee shop, there's going to be another agency there that you can talk to.
Tom, is there just? I know we're going long here, but there's something that interests me. Have you noticed in your statistics that there has been a shift from people moving agency side to client side? Is that something you track?
We haven't got that in the data.
Right.
So we have job data within the agency sector, but we haven't mapped the kind of the brand ecosystem around agencies. So
I wonder whether that's something that is going to start to. We talk about the shrinkage happening with agencies. I wonder whether we're going to start to see people moving from agency side to client side and having a much deeper appreciation client side of what actually happens in an agency, and therefore feeding back to the agencies and being an advocate for the agencies from within inside a business.
Yeah,
like I've seen that over a number of years, but on a micro scale. But just piqued my interest when you were saying, that shrink going on.
I think it's a really interesting thought. I mean, it's this whole concept of right housing in terms of bringing the right capabilities into the organization as a client, not necessarily the whole function, but some of it. I think having someone from an agency background in that scene who can actually make sense of all the different requirements and recognize where some of that might be kind of in-house, but actually some of it might be outsourced to a specialist. I think you probably will. There's a huge opportunity for agency people in there. Clearly,
I would think so. Yeah.
The other thing we do see is, and this isn't maybe no surprise, but agencies create agencies. So, so we're really good at that. Agencies are brilliant at creating other agencies. So you find that, and that's why I think you have these kind of developments of kind of talent and kind of specialism clusters, because you'll take Epiphany again, my old agency. People would leave Epiphany, really kind of entrepreneurial, brilliant, smart people, and they would go, right, I'm gonna try and do something using this kind of core capability, but I'm going to do it slightly different with this kind of angle on it. And since Epiphany kind of that brand got retired, there's been a whole ecosystem of agencies born from people who grew up together within Epiphany, and that's not an Epiphany only story. That happens in loads of agencies.
That's super exciting, isn't it? I mean, that's just such a lovely legacy of being in an agency and what agencies deliver to the market. So
I had that exact experience today. I was on a podcast of a friend of mine who was an ex-employee, and he has a very, very successful business now that has studios to help people podcast. It is fantastic. And he literally said to me at the beginning of the interview, he said, the reason I'm here is because of you, which was a lovely thing to hear, and because of the agency environment that I essentially had as a starter. And he has gone off and is amazingly successful in his own right in something which podcasts were a thing back then, but they weren't a thing. But it led to, so I love our industry. I absolutely freaking love our industry. I love the people in it. I love the opportunity that it brings. Industry. Yeah, and we need to do the right thing by the people in our industry to help get over the doom and gloom that is going on. We really do, because there's so much good out there.
Yeah. That seems like a brilliant point to sort of bring this conversation to a close. Otherwise, we
might be here a while
talking for a long time further. So, Tom, if people want to reach out to agency by agency, how should they do that? What would you like them to do?
Thank you. So first of all, head to agencybyagency.com. All of the insights and intelligence is there, available for free in terms of our reports and the kind of the things that we're kind of seeing in the market. There's a fortnightly newsletter, again, is completely free.
Great.
And
it is great. Yeah, it's a good read.
Thank you. That comes out every fortnight on a Friday morning. And then if people are interested in using our data to either make sense of what they want to do as an agency, or to find an agency for M&A, to work with as a client, or to work with in a different capacity, drop us a line, and we'd love to help.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for being our guest today. And we look forward to having the conversation in 3 years' time.
No, he said he was wrong.
How can I be wrong?
I love that. Well done. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening to The Space Between, where honest conversations just came to life. Brought to you by MSQ. Visit msqindex.com to learn more. Now, go forth and enter your own space between.